All right, hello everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. Let me adjust my camera here. Um, so I wanted to record a quick video lecture today for our online class. Uh, you know, Over the past couple of weeks, I'm sure we have all seen these statements that are being put out by businesses and companies and organizations that are related to COVID-19. And I just thought it'd be interesting to look at these statements through the lens of writing and rhetoric and communication, right? So not as just not just taking them in as your average public consumer, but to look at them through this academic and this critical lens. So what I want to do today is I've gathered a bunch of different statements that I've come across, I've looked at, and I want to examine them through the lens of genre analysis. Now, there are many different approaches that you could take to analyze these statements. Part of me wanted to introduce you to another rhetorical approach, but given the circumstances, I think it's much easier if we just reviewed genre analysis and use that to sort of examine these statements. So, a quick review of genre analysis. Okay, so all genres have conventions, and we said conventions are a general agreement on or acceptance of certain practices or attitudes. In other words, a set of patterns. Okay, and genres influence the way we act and behave in various social situations. So something even as mundane as ordering food at a restaurant or participating in a group discussion in class, technically these are genres if we think about genres as a set of patterns. There's a set of patterns and habits that we are used to when we order food at a restaurant. If you remember, we watched the video put out by This American Life in class, and we saw how ordering food influenced the way that customers and employees behaved at the Wiener Circle in Chicago. So these statements that we're looking at, these statements that are being put out by businesses and organizations related to COVID-19, these are a genre as well. In fact, I think they fall under PSAs, public service announcements. But as a subcategory, these COVID-19 related statements also have their own set of patterns. So what are some of those patterns that are being put out by companies and organizations in these statements? So we see a lot of phrases and sentences that establish the company or the organization's place in the community. The phrasing I think of when I say this is, it's like they are trying to plant a flag in the ground. So here's an example of one. This is an Instagram post put out by the Ferndale Project, which is this brewery that just opened up in my neighborhood. And so we see in this post, which I really like the visual aspect, they have this empty corridor of their brewery, which I think is very fitting to this whole social distancing idea that is going on right now. But we see it in part of their statement. They say friends and community, so they really try to latch onto that keyword of community. And then later on, they go on to say, like all local businesses whose focus is direct to consumer sales, including most small breweries, we're balancing a razor thin line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so by saying like all local businesses, the Ferndale Project is positioning themselves in the community as well, right? They're saying we are one of these local businesses that is being affected in our community. Here's a statement put out by Design Core Detroit, which is an organization that they put on a lot of events to get startups and local businesses to interact with one another. But they have a statement in their they have a sentence in their statement that says our first priority is the safety of our team and the community. So again, we see they are acknowledging the community. They're trying to show that they themselves are part of the community as well, right? Something that they care about. Some other textual patterns in these statements that I'm noticing, excuse me, the fluid use of we and other inclusive first person plural pronouns. So words like we, words like our, words like us, okay? And they're being used very fluidly. Sometimes they're being used to refer to the author organization or the authoring business. Sometimes they're being used to describe the community at large. So there's a very fluid use of it. So here's an example. Here's a statement that was put out by Uber Eats. So we see right off the bat, they say we are committed to supporting our community, right? we're doing this, we support this. But what I thought was very interesting is that there's this shift at the end, the last statement of the last sentence of the statement, we're in this together, let's support our community, let's eat local. Okay, so up here, the use of we here is being used to refer to Uber Eats as the organization. They're talking about themselves. But then as we shift down here, we see inclusive language referring to the community at large. We're in this together. Let's support our community. Let us eat local. Let's all eat local. Okay, so there's this pattern of inclusive language being used in these statements. And it makes sense because in this time, you don't want to create distance or separation between you and the consumer. You're trying to show that we're all part of the same group. What else do we see? We see that there's a recognition of customer and public support. So these statements are not being used to simply inform or update customers or the public, but they're being also used to show gratitude. They're being used to give thanks. Here is a response put out by Noble Fish, which is a local sushi place. The last part of their statement says, as the situation evolves, we will continue to build or provide updates. Thank you for your trust and support as we strive to provide the best possible service and experience for you during this time. So we see a lot of these statements in which the company or the business, they are thanking the consumer for their long-standing business and hoping that it continues through this time. These statements are also being used to assure the public of something. So maybe there's a recognition and there's a validation of the public's fear and concerns. There's also statements or sentences that are expressed to inspire confidence. I found this joint industry statement that was put out by Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube. Okay, so in this statement, these huge tech companies, they're saying we are working together on COVID-19 response efforts. We're helping millions of people stay connected while also jointly combating fraud and misinformation about the virus, elevating authoritative content on our platforms, and sharing critical updates in coordination with government healthcare agencies around the world. We invite other companies to join us as we work to keep our communities healthy and safe. Okay, so these, this statement here, we see these tech companies trying to assure the public we're doing everything in our power. We're trying to cut down on the amount of misinformation. We're trying to elevate the experts and the authorities so that their voice gets out. So they're trying to alleviate the stresses that the public might face in this time of uncertainty. This one I thought was very interesting. I found this is a statement put out by Cooper Vision, which is a contact lens company. So, initially there's this thought that contact lens companies, they might not have anything to say or acknowledge during this time, but in the statement that they put out, they say there is currently no evidence to suggest that there is any increased risk of infection or contracting coronavirus through contact lens wear. So here we see a statement that is directly speaking to their consumers, people who use contact lenses, trying to assure them that don't worry, you can continue putting in your contact lenses and not increase the risk of getting the virus. Some other patterns that I'm noticing. There's these statements and sentences that explain how the company or the organization has updated its policies and practices. This is probably something that you have seen a lot. Here's from the statement released by the Ferndale Project, that brewery that I was talking about earlier. So they give examples here of how they are trying to combat this through new practices. Hourly alarms on all of our points of sale that remind staff to wash hands and sanitize surfaces. They also go on to say, we've installed hand sanitizers at the entrance of both locations and please use them. You may have seen a lot of these. Oftentimes in these statements, they follow a similar format in which they are bullet pointed, almost like a list of things that the company or the business is doing. Here is a statement that was put out by Whole Foods. So again, bullet points of what they are doing in this time. Okay, finally, a pattern I'm noticing is that these statements are being used by companies to give suggestions for healthy and mindful living during this time of quarantine. And I noticed a really interesting example from this email I got from Abode, which is a home security system. And so they go on to say, since we're all finding ourselves in the midst of unique challenges, we put our heads together virtually to brainstorm some tech-savvy projects you and your kiddos can do at home. And if you follow this link here, they take you to this blog where they have suggestions of projects you can do at home. Something very similar is Oakland is putting out right now. They're asking for faculty and students to write up these stories of what it's like to live during this time, which I'm guessing they're going to try to share later on. Okay. So why do these patterns exist? So if you remember from genre analysis, it's not enough to just look for the patterns, but we have to then unpack those patterns and think a little bit about why they exist. Just as a quick brainstorm, some things I thought about why these patterns exist. One, it's an attempt for by these companies and organizations to stay relevant in this time. Business is sort of slowing down. The economy is slowing down. Businesses, they want to stay in the minds of the public, right? They want to make sure their consumers and their customers don't forget about them. So on one hand, they definitely are trying to update the public on what they are doing differently, but it's another way of reading these statements is these companies saying like, hey, like, don't forget about us, we're still here. These statements are also an appeal to the company or the organization's ethos, meaning they're trying to lean and build up on their credibility. By putting out these statements, I think these companies believe that they are improving their credibility. They're trying to show the public, hey, we're not just sitting back and doing nothing. Here are how we are being proactive during this time. And finally, these statements are being used as business stimulants during this time of economic uncertainty. I believe, let's see, we can go back to the Uber Eats statement. Sorry, I might have passed it. Right. Uber Eats right now is offering $0 delivery fee for independent restaurants in the US and Canada. Okay, and you can request food to be left at your doorstep. So these companies in these statements, they're trying to stimulate business, right? They're trying to get customers to still spend money at their place of business, even though everything is slowing down. Okay, I'm sure there are many different other reasons for why these patterns exist, but these are just some ones that I thought of. As work for this week, we are going to post a form on our Moodle in which you will get a chance to identify and analyze 2 statements of your own that you found. And you'll do some of the things that I did in this lecture, which is basically trying to get a sense of what is the purpose of these statements and how effective they are. Okay. Other than that, I hope you're staying healthy, staying sane. Please continue working on your final projects with your group, and please email myself or Dr. Sue if you have any questions. Okay. Thank you, guys.